The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight on The Agenda.
67% of our wardrobe is plastic. A lot of people don't realize that. Polyester, acrylic, nylon, spandex. It all is crude oil, petroleum derived. It's fossil fuels. This industry is built on the back of the fossil fuel industry.
Then, later on The Agenda.
Secondhand fashion inherently is a more mindful way to shop because you can't just go in and buy the thing that you want right away.
Also tonight.
For me, this notion of understanding that, oh, I don't necessarily belong to this inside culture, this at the time, this white culture, which was synonymous with pop culture at the time, and it led me to understand that I'm a black boy.
Greenwashing, trying to make things seem more eco-friendly than they actually are, happens in many sectors. In the fashion industry, critics have pointed to fast fashion and misleading claims about sustainability as evidence that no one is really being held to account. With us now on what's needed to move the needle in the right direction, let's welcome Kelly Drennan. She is founding executive director of a group called Fashion Takes Action. And Jacqueline Patterson is here. She's a personal wardrobe stylist and founder of the online platform and store Shopwise. And I am happy to welcome both of you here to TVO tonight. Let's just start to, let's define what we're talking about here. Jacqueline, you first. Sustainable fashion means what?
Yeah, so the way I define it, Steve, is two-sided from a brand and business perspective. So a business that really embodies sustainability at every stage of their business, so within how they produce, but also how they market and sell and the quality of items that they produce, but then also from an individual perspective. So us as people, as consumers, how can we adopt a more sustainable lifestyle through the clothing that we wear and buy?
Anything you'd add to that definition?
Yeah, I think, sustainability in fashion has like a long list of definitions, and it could mean that from a social perspective, that the workers were paid a living wage or a fair wage to make the garments. It could mean that the clothing was made in more environmentally ways, such as, not using fossil fuels to produce the clothes or not using fossil fuels themselves in the clothing, which is, 67% of our clothes are synthetic, which is our plastics. Mm-hmm. Looking at things like reducing the amount of water, the water pollution, less chemicals. So really clothing that is made with people and planet in mind.
So there's a superficial definition and then there's a really deep dive definition on this. Yeah. And I guess one of the things we want to figure out is how much of this is really going on and how much of it is sort of advertised as going on but really isn't. Mm-hmm. Am I right, Jacqueline, in saying that maybe 10 years ago people were more interested in getting something that was fashionable and they didn't think too much about the sustainability of it? But they do think more about the sustainability of it today?
Absolutely. I feel like people are definitely considering it more. There's actually this concept called the say-do gap. So about 80% of consumers say that they want and prioritize more sustainable purchasing behavior and where we shop, but about only 10% actually do. And there's a list of barriers there that we could talk all day about as well. But I think the concept of sustainability used to be just, for a certain group of people, and it's become a lot more mainstream, which is really exciting to see, but it's also added a lot of confusion for people on understanding where to shop and how to understand what are the best brands to buy from.
Well, let's talk budgets for a second, because everybody is worried about affordability today and everybody wants a bargain. Can you really devote yourself to being sustainable and get a great price at the same time?
Okay, so my favorite answer to this is that the most sustainable garment is the one that's already in your closet.
Gotcha.
So really, we need to think about buying less. So when we have that urge to go and buy something new, we need to really slow down and think about, do we really need that? Do I already own something in my closet that's very similar? Because the other percentage thing I'd like to throw out there is this 80-20 rule around, we wear 20% of our wardrobe 80% of the time. So I always tell people, get acquainted with your wardrobe, remind yourself what's in there, and reconnect with why you bought it in the first place.
Because a lot of stuff never leaves the closet.
Exactly. And then in terms of the cost, okay, so yes, buying something that was made fairer and made better for the planet is going to cost more because it represents the true cost of that garment. Something that was sold for $2 or $5 on these ultra fast fashion websites means that somebody somewhere wasn't paid to do that job of making that garment, or worse. And so round out, invest in sustainably made clothing that's new, but round it out with buying vintage and secondhand.
The message of buy less is not something clothing manufacturers would like to hear, I presume.
Yeah.
Is this like built-in tension in the industry here?
Absolutely, and I feel like it's really hard as individuals. We're being marketed to through our phones, through ads, online in stores, and so it's a lot of pressure on us to have to ask those questions. I always say ask why before you buy, and shop your closet. Shop like the 20 or 30%. Shop the 70% that we're not necessarily wearing, because there is that pressure on individuals, but it's really hard when there's the demand from all the brands to make their own profits as well, right? Yeah.
So your group's called Fashion Takes Action. What kind of action are you taking?
Well, we're taking action in terms of, really moving the industry in Canada towards more sustainable and circular and ethical business practices. We're taking action with consumers and helping educate them and raising awareness through different programming events and workshops. And we have a school program, for example, as well. So it's really about accelerating the action that's needed for us to move to this more sustainable and circular economy for fashion.
Are companies listening to you?
Yes, yeah. I mean, we've been around 17 years. We've worked with, every single brand in Canada in some capacity. It's very exciting to see over that time how much of a shift there has been. Early in the early years, I never would have thought we'd be working with big brands. It was always smaller independent designers. Now we're seeing these big brands having teams tasked with sustainability and circularity, whereas before it might have been something that's just done off the side of someone's desk. So there's been a lot of progress, and there seems to be a lot of willingness to, and champions within the brands themselves.
Tell me about Shopwise and how you presumably live this in your daily activities.
Yeah, so I launched Shopwise through my work as a wardrobe stylist. So I've been styling for over 10 years, and with a focus on slow and sustainable fashion. And over the years, Steve, I found that a lot of people want to shop smarter and more local, but they don't really want to sacrifice their time or convenience. So I figured, how can we make it easier for people to discover these brands? And that's where the idea for Shopwise was born, is, if we can create a one-stop shop with pre-vetted brands that people can trust, that prioritize people and planet, let's do that so we can make it easier. And we're an online platform that has over 30 brands on our site, and all the brands that we work with are small businesses in Canada. 98% of them are women-owned as well, and they're truly phenomenal business owners just trying to make the world a better place through
Let me follow
fashion.
up on that. How do you know, how do you vet them to make sure that they are what they say they are?
Yeah, great question. So it's a process we take very seriously. We essentially created a sustainable and ethical code of conduct, and this is something that we are transparent with our community online. It's on our website, and it's basically 10 different ways that a brand that we think can embody sustainability and fair ethical consumption. And so all the brands on our platform have to abide by that, and we hold them accountable. They sign a contract when they come over to our platform to make sure we're all working together.
So give me an example of sort of one of those codes that they absolutely have to follow, and another one, that
Yeah, it's
maybe
a little more negotiable.
Exactly.
So the one that we absolutely require is mandatory is fair wages and ethical production. So any product on Shopwise, we can ensure that it's made with the garment workers in mind, and anyone along that supply chain is being paid fairly. And then, so that's non-negotiable. And then the other factors are, what products or what fabrics are they using, what textiles are they using to produce their clothing, what's their packaging look like, are they a low waste production process? Do they, offset their carbon? Are they certified? So a lot of those are kind of based on the business and what they have capacity for as well.
Okay. Now, you mentioned a second ago you're in the schools. What are you doing with students these days?
We have a program called My Clothes, My World, and it's for students in grades 4 to 12. We've delivered the program to over 35,000 Canadian students now to date over the last decade.
Amazing.
So what we believe that fashion, because it intersects with so many other industries, from farming and agriculture to plastics, chemicals, manufacturing, there's so much opportunity to talk about bigger, broader climate-related issues like deforestation and biodiversity and plastics and microfibers. And so what we believe is that fashion is a very fun and relatable topic for kids to learn about those issues. And so we don't kind of go in it from just a sustainable fashion perspective, but again, really sort of toying with this idea or appealing to the idea for kids that fashion is a fun way to learn about these other issues. So we have a number of different workshops that we do. We get them upcycling old t-shirts into bags. We get them playing role play where they each like pick a role within the supply chain, and they have to have a debate amongst themselves around like what should they be paid for a $10 t-shirt, let's say. So there's a lot of interaction as well. It's really rewarding.
That's great.
Okay, shall we get into this here?
Sure.
Okay, we don't, I mean, it's up to you whether you want to name and shame, but obviously, I mean, I saw one of the studies in some of the research I read for this, which suggested that almost 60% of companies that claim that they're green are actually greenwashing. They're not legit, but they're trying to surround themselves in the glory of claiming to be green. So there's a lot of, and I suspect people know this, right? There's a lot of skepticism by consumers as to whether or not something really is green. Discuss. How do you try and get these companies on the straight and narrow?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, a way to identify if a company is truthful is if they're transparent. And that's the issue we're seeing a lot of nowadays, is that brands will use marketing to say they're sustainable and they care about their, garment workers, but then they have no proof to back it up in any way. And so I think holding brands accountable is really powerful.
How do you do that?
Literally email them, talk to them, connect with organizations like Fashion Takes Action that are really spearheading those conversations. Consumers as individuals, we actually have a lot of power, voting power of where we buy, but also literally speaking up, using social media, writing to brands, and calling them out, if they're doing something unethical.
So you do that publicly?
Oh yeah,
so
for sure.
Kelly,
Why not?
Would you email a company, Kelly, and say, you know what, we know you're claiming to be green, but you're not green, and we're calling you out on this? And do they just tell you to go screw off and mind your own business?
Well, we work a little bit differently than some of those other organizations that will rally civil society together to sign petitions and pledges. Because we have a working relationship with the brands, if we do believe that they are greenwashing, we will say something to them, hoping that it actually resonates. Because we do a lot of work, we're unique for an NGO in that we actually work with the consumers too. So we're constantly hearing feedback from that space that we can relay back to the brands. But actually, we've just conducted Canada's first federal study on greenwashing in fashion. So we have some preliminary results coming out of this. I was just looking at them this morning, and it's unbelievable, really. 50% of Canadians feel like they've been misled. As well, about 50% of Canadians can't identify greenwashing. And so this is a real problem.
It's worse than that. You know what? I got. Here's from Deloitte Canada. Let me, Sheldon, you want to put this up? Because it's actually a little worse than that. Here's what Deloitte found. 57% of Canadian consumers do not believe most green claims brands make. Consumers are confused and frustrated by the proliferation of sustainability claims, while business leaders think the public has a significant 71% or moderate level of trust in the authenticity of those claims. That's a heck of a disconnect there, right?
Yeah.
It is. So, so our study was just specifically around fashion, but, it is problematic, and we're hoping that we can actually take the results and go back to industry to say, this is how the consumer feels now about being misled, but also so that we can work with the Canadian government to make some stricter regulations and laws in place, because that's really, at the end of the day, what's going to prevent the brands from actually making these false claims.
If you're a consumer and you haven't got a lot of education in this field, how do you know what to look for to determine whether or not a company genuinely is green or is faking it?
Yeah, I think a great, in my perspective, the best way is to kind of dive deep into their website. Almost every brand nowadays will have a sustainability tab on their homepage because they want to make it appear like they're more sustainable than they are. Really dive deep into that brand, see how much information they're sharing there on where their factories are, where they produce their clothing. And also, I think something to be mindful of is there's a lot of brands making shifts towards more sustainable production. And so seeing what are their goals and what metrics are they actually working towards as well. And if they don't have any of that info, nothing to share, they're not really trying very hard, and then there you have your answer.
Can you help with something?
Yeah, and I wanted to jump off something that Jacqueline had mentioned earlier about transparency. And I think it's really important because transparency is so key and really helping all stakeholders know how their clothes are made. But one of the challenges that the industry is facing, especially the bigger brands, is tracing their supply chain. So if you think about traceability as knowing and transparency as showing, you can't show what you're doing until you know what you're doing. And because the fashion supply chain is so global, the average t-shirt is made in 7 countries. So for a fashion brand to actually be able to trace their supply chain is one of the biggest problems or challenges that they're facing.
They may genuinely not know then.
Exactly. And so what they need to be doing is being forthcoming about that. Just say, hey, we're working on it. Yeah. We can go back as far as maybe the factory where it was cut and sewn, but we can't go all the way back to the cotton farm. Yeah. We don't know that yet, right? And then also looking at things like certifications. So there's a number of different certifications that can verify some of these claims. They're third-party accredited certifiers like the Global Organic Textile Standard, which is the GOTS standard for organic cotton. You've got things like B Corporation now for fashion businesses, which sort of covers the social and environmental. You've got Fair Trade Certified, which will obviously speak to the wages and the conditions of the garment workers. So looking for those certifications and becoming more familiar with what those logos are, I think is a really helpful tool as well.
But you mentioned like a look on a website for a logo indicating they are a sustainable group or something like that. How do you know all that stuff's legit, or whether they're just putting it up there to look good?
Yeah, I agree with what Kelly said. That's why certification can be really helpful. But the challenges from the smaller brand perspective is that it usually costs a lot to be able to get certified and to even be able to use that logo on your platform. And so for someone that's looking for the transparency, and maybe the larger brands are working on it and they don't really have that on their platform or their website yet, that's where the smaller, more independent businesses do have the ability to show their transparency. So they know where they source their fabrics from, they know who literally sews their garments together.
Yeah, they often visit the communities in India or wherever they are being made, and they have photographs of them being there with the artisans and things like that.
So for someone looking that really wants to prioritize that transparency, that's where shopping small and local can be more helpful for them. Yeah.
Is there a role for, you mentioned regulation and the federal government's role in this. The Competition Bureau presumably looks into this.
Yes.
Do they do a good job?
Well, there is the first case in Canada, really, that is on a big scale right now. So we'll see how the Competition Bureau reacts to it.
You want to say who's at the center of all this?
It's a big yoga brand.
Does it start with an L?
Yes.
Okay. You see, we're all trying hard not to get sued here, but okay, yeah, very good.
There's an organization called Stand Earth, and they have actually filed the complaint with the Competition Bureau around this. So it is an interesting space now to be watching to see just how they respond. Is it a slap on the wrist? Is it going to be enough to really deter them from, continuing along in this misleading way? We haven't really seen a case like this in the fashion industry in Canada before, but I don't believe that the law in place is really strong enough and will deter.
While we all understand that we are considered innocent before proven guilty, this is a public case that has been filed with a public agency of the federal government. So again, I appreciate your reticence to name and shame here, but do we know what's the accusation here that they're dealing with?
Well, again, 67% of our wardrobe is plastic. A lot of people don't realize that. Polyester, acrylic, nylon, spandex. It all is crude oil, petroleum derived. It's fossil fuels. This industry is built on the back of the fossil fuel industry. And so you have companies that not only are using coal-powered factories to produce their clothing, but you also have companies that are using these synthetic materials as the bulk of their clothing. And so in this particular case with this brand, it's about the energy consumption that goes into making their clothes, and the fact that their marketing is a little bit misleading in terms of healthy well-being, good for the planet, that kind of thing. So that's it's the irony.
Well done. Yes. Well done. Is there anything the rest of us can kind of do about this?
I think something that's challenging about the state right now is that for brands, we're not requiring them to, prove how they are sustainable. It's almost the other way around, that we're having to prove how they're not sustainable. And so, if there's anything that we can learn from this, is that, as consumers, there's a lot of pressure on us to make these, better shopping decisions. But I think we have to have some grace as well, because it hasn't been this confusing ever before to shop sustainable.
I got about a minute left here, Kelly, and I want to give it to you to talk about this first report on greenwashing that you are doing right now.
Yes.
So what are you doing? How are you doing it? How's it going, etc.?
Yeah, we surveyed 2,000 Canadians. We wanted to know their attitudes and behaviors towards sustainable fashion, circular fashion, and then greenwashing. So we actually even gave them 10 different scenarios that were, some of them were true examples of greenwashing and some of them weren't at all. They were actually legitimate claims with proof to see, could they identify it? And that's where I was saying about 50% of them could not identify it. And so, yeah, so we will have this study published probably by the fall. Preliminary findings, though, for sure in the spring. So we're pretty excited to have some of that.
It's amazing.
Terrific.
That's great.
We should have you back then when you figure out what's going on.
Please do.
Okay. Thanks to both of you, Kelly Drennan, Jacqueline Patterson. That was really interesting. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
As a consumer, one of the things that we can do is think more mindfully. Secondhand fashion inherently is a more mindful way to shop because you can't just go in and buy the thing that you want right away. It does force you to slow down. I'm Christina Urquhart. I am the publisher and founder of The Vintage Seeker, which is an online magazine for vintage buyers and sellers. I create content for consumers to show them where to find cool secondhand things, and I also provide education about the resale and secondhand market so that people can get more understanding of what's going on. I have always loved buying secondhand. I started in the furniture and decor world, and then I kind of moved into the fashion world. I've been very entrenched in the Toronto vintage community for a number of years, and this was my pandemic project. So I decided to do something creative, and I wanted to create a space that would provide information for consumers and for sellers because there wasn't a lot that existed in a sort of modern format. You know, I'm very active on social media. I've got newsletters and a website. So that taking that old world of vintage and antiques and putting a new spin on it. And that's kind of where the idea started, and it's evolved over time. And now I'm very involved in the reselling community itself and listening to what they have to say and trying to condense it and repackage it and get it out to consumers. So that's a big part of what I'm doing. The major platforms in Canada that you can find items that are being resold include Poshmark and Facebook Marketplace. Those are two big ones for reselling clothing. There's also Depop, there's eBay, there's Etsy. There's a number of resale apps that are available. There's a few that are up and coming as well. There's one called Starluv, STARLUV. Those are the big five. I can't speculate why they showed up in the first place. I would hedge a bet that some of the platforms are there because there's an opportunity in the marketplace. There's a huge group of people who want to buy and sell, and these companies are trying to fill that void. So I can't say that they necessarily are sustainable 100% focused, but they are helping to contribute to this idea of reusing the things that we already have. Poshmark and Facebook Marketplace are probably two of the biggest. There is clothing sold on Etsy, but there's a real community around these. So Poshmark in particular, they have built a platform that allows people to come together and have parties, live shows, all kinds of things. So people really have a tie to that app. They want to continue using it. It would be very hard to draw them away from that app if there's already something that's providing the thing that they need. And then Facebook Marketplace is, one of those places we all know we take our risks when we use Facebook Marketplace, but it's very easy because there's no fees, there's nothing really happening. You just set up your own meeting with a buyer and seller and you can kind of go from there. Vinted actually doesn't allow businesses to sell on its app. So by the time that it came to Canada in 2021, we had already seen this steady climb of people who were very interested in buying and selling. COVID happened, people were reaching into their closets and wanting to sell products from them and starting small businesses on the side of their desk, basically. So because they weren't able to do that on that app, it was purely for person to person. I think it was really hard to draw people off of the platforms they were already using, like Facebook Marketplace already exists for that in Canada. So Vinted, I think, had a hard time marketing to people. There wasn't a lot of outreach to let people know that it was here in the first place. I didn't know a lot of people who were using it, so that experience, I think, had something to do with the fact that they pulled out. Having something new they really need to impress people in order to make it last. So overconsumption is tied to secondhand, absolutely. I think it's important as consumers that we remember that these resale marketplaces that are owned by companies like H&M, they have other goals, right? They want people to come onto their website to, yes, browse their secondhand items, but they also want you to stick around and look at all of the new items. And those initiatives that they have are propped up by the sale of their new items. They can't recycle what their products are unless they've got people also buying the new stuff. So that is a very insidious thing that is part of our culture. We are constantly being sold to. We are constantly, even in the secondhand space, people are selling products to you. Of course they are. They have small businesses. They want you to buy their products. So as a consumer, one of the things that we can do is think more mindfully. Secondhand fashion inherently is a more mindful way to shop because you can't just go in and buy the thing that you want right away. It does force you to slow down. You know, there are a lot of haul videos online showing people who are grabbing all kinds of stuff. It might be secondhand, but they're still participating in that mindset that, you know, a lot of consumers participate in with fast fashion. So, you know, we want to be careful of that. We want to be mindful of that. But for the most part, secondhand fashion requires you to stop and think a little bit because you generally can't go in and find the thing that you want right away. It does take a little bit more time. The pricing conversation is difficult because when we're talking about people who sell secondhand goods, they have a value in their service that they have to build into the price. So the price is never going to be the same as what you might find at a thrift store. However, there are always going to be people who are going to take advantage of an environment or take advantage of the market. There's going to be a wide range of people in any sector. So in this one, it's the exact same. We have people who are really trying to keep their prices affordable. We have people who want to make a living wage doing what they're doing, which is absolutely fair. And then, of course, we have people who are going to take advantage. So as a consumer, the best thing that you can do is to learn more about what it is that you're buying. If you're interested in vintage Levi's denim, doing your research and finding out how the different colored labels actually affect the price in the end and why some are more valuable than other. That'll help you to train yourself as you are shopping so that you can recognize, okay, this is a good deal. I understand why this is priced this much because this person went out and sourced it, they cleaned it, they repaired it, they're doing all these things to it, and those will help you make those connections. There is a difference between a thrift store and a secondhand store. So a thrift store will receive its product from charities. So basically when you donate your clothing to those clothing bins, charities will collect all of that clothing, bale it up, and they'll sell it to charities like Value Village or Goodwill for a fee, a flat fee. After they do that, the charity is out of the picture. That's the point when the thrift store has paid the charity. There's no more direct helping the charity after that. Then the thrift store has all the items and they can turn around and put them on their shop floor. They also are receiving products for free from people who just drop off boxes of stuff at the back of the store. So they have all of this inventory, and at that point, it's up to them to do what they please with it, right? So we as a public are sort of under this impression that thrift stores are there to help people in need, and that is what they were there for historically. However, thrift stores have evolved over time, and some of them are for-profit corporations now, and they have goals, right? They want to increase their profits. So the pricing things that we are seeing on the floor at the thrift store, price increases that we are seeing on the floor at the thrift store, are reflective of the thrift store's goals to essentially make more money, right? Anybody can shop at the thrift store. You don't have to be, you know, without means to shop at the thrift store. You can enjoy it as an activity. Thrifting is an activity. A secondhand store, on the other hand, is owned by a small business owner who has gone out to myriad places to source their products. That does include thrift stores sometimes. Not every secondhand seller does go to the thrift store to find stuff. They'll also go to private collections, estate sales. They're finding stuff on the side of the road. They're going all over, multiple hours a week to find this stuff. And they are adding a level of service that the thrift store isn't adding, right? They are cleaning the items, they are repairing the items, they are photographing the items if they're an online seller, they're merchandising the items if they're in a store. They have the same kind of labor costs that a thrift store would have in terms of paying their employees, paying their rent, all that kind of stuff. So the price is going to be higher. You're also getting a different customer service experience at a secondhand boutique than you are getting at a thrift store, and that's also reflected in the price. So there is a difference when it comes to what both are offering, and there is a difference in price. What we're seeing with the thrift stores, of course, is that they are using some of the open market values on items to price their goods. And that's been documented by staff on the thrift store floor who are told to use comps online, which means going online, using Google Lens, finding the item on Google search, and then finding an Etsy listing that may have been put together by a secondhand seller who has valued their item in a very specific way, and then turning around and putting that price on the item at the thrift store. And that's where we get all these videos online of people, you know, finding a vase at the thrift store for $50, and you're wondering why that is. Well, that's why, because they're using market value to determine the prices of items at the stores, and that is an issue. Affordability is very important, and ensuring access to goods for people who need them is important. And thrift stores, I think, should be stepping up to offer more programs for certain segments of customers. A lot of people don't actually know when you donate an item, you get a coupon in return so that you can come back and buy something. So encouraging more donations is another way that we can help with that. However, I also want to make sure that we don't confuse affordability with access to goods, because availability of the goods is not the issue. There is an oversupply and overabundance of goods. Like I said earlier, 25% of what actually comes to a thrift store even makes it to the floor in the first place. So it's not about the goods themselves, it's about the access to the prices, and the prices are too high on some of those trendy items. So thrift stores can definitely help. Consumers can also help. They can go and do their thrifting at independent stores that are keeping their prices low for their community, because those do still exist. We can also see more funding towards government funding towards programs, municipal programs that would ensure access to clothing for people who need it. And so that's something that's a little bit different than what we've historically done in the past. We've relied on thrift stores to provide this service, and not all of them are necessarily providing that service, because that's one segment of their customer base now. Their customer base has changed over the years.
What does it mean to be a Black boy in Ontario schools these days? Matthew R. Morris writes about race, identity, and belonging from his point of view as a product of the school system and now as an educator within it.
Yeah. Let's go.
Being raised by a white Canadian mom and a Jamaican immigrant dad,
Yeah.
when did you start thinking about race?
I started thinking about race probably around grade 6 or grade 7, around the age of 12. And the reason why is because, you know, when I grew up, it was the mid-90s when I really started to come to an understanding of what being a boy meant and what being popular meant and what fitting in meant. And during that time, in the mid-90s, culture didn't necessarily look like how culture looks like today. You know, culture in the early 90s was these sitcoms with the white family, like Home Improvement, and the teeny boppers like Justin Taylor Thomas and a young Leo DiCaprio, and Saved by the Bell with Zach and AC Slater. So, you know, in music too, it was, you know, these boy bands like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys, and that was kind of what infiltrated youth culture at the time. I think, like all youth, you're trying to emulate what you see from the outside world, and at that time, that type of culture was so dominant. And I kind of wanted to fashion myself like those teeny bopper boys, so I tried to grow out my hair. And when I grew my hair out, it kind of grew like a cloud to the sky, and it didn't matter how much mousse or gel or dippity-doo that my mom went to Shoppers Drug Mart and bought. By like 10:30 in the morning, you know, it dried up and my hair just expanded from it. And that was the first time I came to the realization that, you know, different identities are kind of demarcated by race. And it was, for me, this notion of understanding that, oh, I don't necessarily belong to this inside culture, this at the time, this white culture, which was synonymous with pop culture at the time, and it led me to understand that yeah, I'm a black boy.
Well, let's talk about that. You're a teacher now, but when you were in school, when you were in this school, what did you notice about black boys like you?
Yeah, so I'll continue down the journey, right? So very quickly after that time, when I started to get a little bit older and transition into middle school, like where we are right now, the demographic actually shifted. And at the time, I was born and raised in Scarborough, Ontario. And in the early 90s, the demographic was still predominantly white. But over that decade in the 90s, the demographic in the East End of Toronto started to change drastically, right? It became very diverse in terms of the communities that started to move in here. A lot of black bodies, a lot of brown bodies, a lot of Asian bodies. And with that also came this transition in culture where, all of a sudden hip hop started to emerge and become a very mainstream popular form of culture. And with that came, the prominence of the NBA and its kind of height with, Michael Jordan, and then later on Allen Iverson and Vince Carter. So what I started to identify with was this idea of hip hop culture, and shows like I mentioned, Home Improvement, which were predominant, started to become replaced by these television shows like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Martin. So for me, I started to, again, wanting to belong, fashion myself to this aesthetic and identity that I started to actually have interest in, right? I was interested in sports. I delved into hip hop music, and I really found myself reflected in some of the artists and songs that I heard on the radio or in my Panasonic CD player. So for me, that started to shift in terms of me no longer wanting to grow out and gel my hair, but maybe grow out and get braids, or maybe have a fade with a part in my hair, and hopefully one day maybe look aesthetically more like the older black men who I aspire to be like.
All right, I want to pick up on that. You write about these perceived successful roles for black boys in being limited to, music and sports, and a journey that you took yourself when you decided to pursue, not baseball, we won't judge you for that, but football. What can you tell us a little bit about that in terms of, that's something that you saw yourself, this is the role that life and society are kind of telling me to go into that direction, and you did go in that direction and ultimately turned differently, but what was that kind of growing up?
Yeah, I think that, there's a reality in which, young black males have this unarticulated, internalized experience of when they are in places like a school, of almost being subconsciously told how they can be legitimate and ways that they might be an anomaly in. So for instance, through institutions like education and the media and news and TV shows and movies, we see this notion where black males are either the athlete or they're the entertainer, rapper, artist, comedian, actor, or unfortunately we see them portrayed in movies and in real life when we turn on the news of being criminals. And it's this idea of growing up where I felt as a young black male that these were the only avenues to success as a black adult, black male adult. So for me, I pursued this path towards athletics because not only did I enjoy athletics, but it was almost this idea of a self-fulfilling prophecy where I won races at recess and I was decently athletic when we played volleyball in gym or played floor hockey outside in the winter time, or started to play basketball when the Toronto Raptors came to Canada. But it was almost subconscious in the way that my teachers would validate me like that. They would push me and congratulate me for doing well at a track meet, where it wasn't like I was getting C's and D's. I was getting good grades in grade 4, grade 5, middle school, and into high school. But when I was getting those good grades, it was almost like I was treated like an anomaly. So I'll give you an example. I remember a few times actually early on in my high school career, maybe grade 9, when I would get a test back and a teacher would ask me questions from the test. And when I got home, I would reflect on that experience, and I would ask myself, why did that teacher ask me to reiterate a question that was on the test? And I would think and wonder if she asked anybody else, and she didn't. And then it was like this understanding that, oh, she was testing me to see if I cheated and to see if I actually remembered what the content was on the test. And she didn't say anything. It wasn't this, explicit, oh, I think you're less than, I don't believe that you're academically inclined, but it's these subtle markers of unexpected, subtle racism. And I do use the word racism where it's being pigeonholed and stereotyped. Whereas on the athletic field, on that platform, Black boys like me were congratulated and validated. And in the academic space, we're questioned or considered anomalies. So that's just an example of the ways that I think society in general almost whispers the ways in which Black males are allowed to exist.
In your book, you take us through 8 essays, sort of journeying through different parts of your life, different times. And in one of them, you focus on sort of the role music, particularly hip hop, played in forming your identity. You touched on that a little bit, but there's great, your opening essay about that trip to the music store, having to even explain to your mother that this is what I really want. This is me.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I remember that like it was yesterday, right? And this was a time where hip hop was becoming mainstream, right? And I remember that experience that I write about in the essay on music and on hip hop. My mom took me to Sunrise Records at Cedar Brae Mall in Scarborough right before my 9th birthday. I was going into the 3rd or 4th grade, and this guy was like the biggest, most baddest guy that's came out, and his name was Snoop Dogg, and he had this debut record, this debut album. I'm not gonna tell you what the title is for the sake of the viewers, but let's just say it was explicit in a way that a 9-year-old wouldn't even understand.
Right.
And my mother, when I gave her the tape, she was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to buy you this, and she was mentioning Mariah Carey and Toni Braxton and, all these other people that she thought that I should consider. And I was just telling her, like, no, I need this. Like, I literally need this. And, in the book, there's a through line that exists between my relationship with my mother that I think is important, right? It's the idea of, I'm a Black male. The world sees me as a Black male. And, my mother is a first-generation Canadian white woman, right? And her ability to not gatekeep my Blackness, not impede on my experiences in terms of what it was that I wanted to experience, in terms of my identity and how I wanted to belong and fit in and represent myself. That there was a prime example that I think was important to share. The story alone of, the idea of how hip-hop infiltrates our identity and our ways in which we make meaning of ourselves.
All right. Throughout high school and into college, football was life. You went into the States on a scholarship to a couple of colleges there, but now you work as an educator. And I'm curious if you can walk me through that journey from these classrooms as a student and now as a teacher.
Well, this place to me is it's a safe haven, so to speak.
Well, right there, we got 2016, 2017.
Yeah.
That's you.
Yeah. Looking a little younger.
Well, we want to go even younger. 98, 99, where are we?
Yeah, we're right. Where are we? We're right here.
Oh, things have changed.
Things have changed a lot, my friend. That is a few chapters ago in my life.
How does it feel, graduating and then also being able to teach at this school?
I used to, when I taught here, at the end of the first week, I would always bring my class. I actually taught in that classroom, and I would walk my class out here on the Friday at the end of the first week and get them to find me and then kind of tell them that, they could talk to me. I've literally been in their shoes, so whatever they're going through, I've literally went through it because I grew up in this area. But yeah, no, I'm proud to, be a son of Scarborough and gone here and then full circle come back and work in the same community that I grew up in.
How did that even, because that wasn't on your radar?
No, it wasn't at all. If you had told me in the 11th grade at 16 years old that I would end up becoming a teacher and leading a career in education, I would ask you what you had for with your lunch. Yeah, and it for me, I always wanted to have a career in athletics, obviously preferably playing, but even as a sports agent or something in sports management, again, it aligned with this idea of how Black males are allowed to exist. And I led towards that pathway up until the point where I had an injury that actually forced me to consider what it was that I wanted to do with my life. I had to get surgery on my shoulder, and at that time was the first time in my life that I came to the realization that I wasn't going to make the NFL and be a millionaire and live this lavish lifestyle. And upon that, I asked myself if money wasn't necessarily a priority, what would I do with my days? And the answer when I reflected was, I would love to go back to my old high school and just coach the football team. Still aligned with sports,
right,
but now tethered to education. And when I applied and got into the faculty of education, a lot of what we did was reflecting on our educational experiences. And that was the first time that I actually reflected on my experience with education as a Black male. And when I started to reflect, I realized that a lot of my friends, a lot of my family members were impeded by the school system. So that for me started a trajectory to want to get into education and shatter some of the stereotypes. I originally wanted to get into education and become a phys ed teacher and a football coach, but I have a double major in history and English. So I wanted to show up as the teacher who came to an elementary school and taught kids English and taught kids history and looked like this in a way to hopefully help the next generation of Black boys understand that you don't have to look and exist a certain way to lead a certain lifestyle.
I would say to that response, the younger you would have said, oh, but you're sounding like Carlton. How do you feel reflecting back on that? And, sort of, would you poke fun at yourself and be like, oh?
That is a great question. The younger me would say to me that I sound like Carlton. You know what I would tell the younger me? There's nothing wrong with that, because Blackness and Black people don't exist in singularity. And I can be Carlton and also be Will Smith. And just because I sound like Carlton doesn't negate anything from my Blackness. And in fact, I've worked hard to sound like Carlton. I went to school and earned degrees to sound like Carlton. And I could sound like Carlton or I could sound like Will. And there's days where I look like Carlton or look like Will. And that doesn't negate from anything about my authenticity or my identity. Because being Black, just like all other races and identities, exist within a continuum. I think that's a good message to tell young Black people, that it is okay to be authentic to yourself and represent yourself the way that you want. And just because you look a certain way and the outside world may perceive you a certain way, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be rigid with those stereotypes that box you in. I think that's part of the purpose, on shattering the stereotypes, looking like this and talking like Carlton. I think that's kind of cool, to be honest.
You talk about in your book these subtle and not so subtle incidences of racism. Do you think about those things when you are in the actual classroom talking to students, and how does that impact your teaching style? Like, I have to be careful in sort of how I work with Black students in my classroom, making sure that they do feel seen.
Yeah, I think that, before I ever decided to get tattoos, the skin that I'm in is already, I wear my politics on my skin, I wear my identity on my skin. So I think that, for me, representation is something that you can't be on the fence about. I think that, the idea of being apolitical in education is a political stance. And when we look at what exists in education over the last going on 4 decades at this point, there's clearly still empirical data that suggests that there's a gap between black students, namely black boys, and everybody else. So it's important to have leaders and teachers and educators that are able to show up in a way where they're practicing what they preach, so to say, and that their identity is on the line and in line with their work, right? I am a strong advocate for equity work inside of education, inside of school. And every time I show up to do the work, I'm literally and figuratively showing up to do the work. I think also when it comes to representation, I believe in two things. The first thing I believe in is transparency. When you put students first and you are transparent about that, that is equity work. And the second thing that I believe in is being authentic, trying your best and being humble, confident enough to show up as your authentic self. We should be doing that in society on a regular basis, but it's very important to do that in education. It's important to show up as your authentic self.
I imagine you will agree with me in that it's also representation in the books that we read, in the curriculum that we have. As you know, the Ontario curriculum will be updated. It will be September 2025 when, you know, grade 7, 8s, and 10s will see Black history in their curriculum and representation. Do you think that will help?
I do. I think it's a first step. You know, I remember when I was in elementary school, there were staff rooms where teachers still smoked inside of buildings, right? In the staff room, in their, you know, their offices. And they stopped that, and it's changed to the point where if you went to a school, or for any building in that matter, and saw somebody smoking inside, you would immediately have this visceral reaction that that is wrong, right? That's how we shift culture, by these small mandates and implementations that over time make a cultural shift. And when it comes to the curriculum, implementing, in this case, Black history, mandating it in particular grades, that is an important first step. Now, is it going to change everything, you know, as soon as they implement it by the end of that school year? Is it going to eradicate racism? Of course not. But it's a first step to try and attempt to change the culture of education and to prioritize equity and to validate the Black experience, which is important. So I do think it's an important first step.
All right, let's talk family. You're quite raw in sort of the stories that you share. Your cousin who was in Detroit was murdered. You talk about your brother who went to prison for quite a while.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel, even through reflecting on this book, that, you know, your life was falling into a stereotype?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I never really meditated on that. I never considered that, although I'm trying to eradicate and shatter some of these stereotypes that I see that have prevailed when it comes to Black males, when I do sit and think about my life, there are some stereotypes that exist within my own family that is tethered to the Black stereotype of having family members succumb to violence, having close family members go to prison. But that's part of the story, again, right? It's important to not fabricate and share a story that isn't my story. This is my story, and it's important for me to speak about it, not from the outside looking in as some type of expert on the Black experience, or from the inside looking out as some type of weatherman who's trying to give answers and predict the future. This book is an offering to the continuation of the conversation around what it is that the Black experience is. And for me, I'm placing myself in the dead center and merely just looking around, right? The one thing that I think about this book in terms of, you know, how it relates to some particular tropes is that, you know, the only answer is that you need to come up with your own answer when it comes to what the Black experience is like.
All right, I want to talk about your mom. You lost your mom to cancer, and you talk about a very powerful chapter about losing her. But you also talk about sort of your relationship throughout the book about it. And there's this one point where your mom asks you, She's reviewing your writing. She was a masterful copy editor, from what I understand.
Yep.
And she asked you why you only write about being Black, because you are of mixed race, you're half white, half Black. And she was kind of, what was your answer to that?
Yeah, I remember that so vividly. It was, I was, you know, well into university at this point, and essay after essay was, you know, focused on my experience within schools and the experience of, you know, navigating schools as a Black male. And my mother asked me why it is that I'm always writing about being Black. And she said, you know, you're half white too, right? And I answered her and said, yeah, I know that, but the world is Black. They don't see me as this complex concoction of multiple identities. And the conversation that we had was around her sharing that she understood my experience, and me sharing with her that it was important for her to know that by me writing about being Black, I wasn't denying her existence in my life. And that message is the message that I'm trying to get through within this book as I highlight my relationship with my mother. Oftentimes we look at race as this, you know, pardon the pun, black and white dichotomy of, you know, rigid lines. And the conversation about my mother saying, yeah, you're also half white, was her trying to liberate my personhood. And I think that's important for us to keep in mind when we think about race and racial issues, that the goal is to maintain our important cultures and histories, but also to transcend our identities so that we can relate on a person-to-person basis.
Tomorrow on the agenda.
When people think that memory declines with age, what they're thinking about is episodic memory, a type of memory system that's dependent on the hippocampus and the frontal lobes, and our ability to recollect past experiences in rich detail. So, you know, what did you have for breakfast yesterday or 3 days ago? Things like that. People, you know, when they can't remember that, they're like, oh, my memory's declining. But that's not the only type of memory.
That's tomorrow on the agenda. The agenda is always on. To catch up on conversations from this week or any week, visit our website, tvo.org/theagenda, or our YouTube page at youtube.com/theagenda. It's all there for whenever you want to watch.